I'm going to show you start to finish how to make an app that makes a decision. The question I'm going to focus on is how to spend a beautiful day. So the first thing I've done is in design mode, I dragged out a label and I just changed it to say the title of that label is decision label, and the text I wanted to display on the screen was how to spend a beautiful day. And this is going to allow the user to choose two things, two inputs, and then it will spit out a decision how to spend this beautiful day. So you can change the look of that, but I'm going to keep it simple in black and white. I didn't even choose a theme. I just want to get this app to work according to the requirements of the project. So I need to provide places for the user to give input to the decision. The first one, I'm going to make another label. I'm going to keep it kind of small. This is going to be a label that asks the user how much time they have to spend today. How much time? Oops, the name of this label is just going to be time label. I'm going to say, how much time do you have? Question mark. It's just a prompt to the user. So you could change how it looks, but that's not even necessary. Now, I'm going to ask the user to choose how much time they have, and it has to be a number answer because the rubric and the requirements of the project ask for a numerical input and a string input. I could choose to make it a slider that has numbers to pick from, or it could be a drop-down menu that has numbers to pick from. I'm going to steer away from text input because that would leave it too open to the user to type in various types of time, like either minutes or hours or whatever. I want to be more directing them what their options are. So I'm going to use a drop-down menu, and I'm going to make this the time drop-down. That's the name of the box. And I'm going to put the options that they can choose in here. And they're going to be numbers except for the first one. The first one is going to tell the user what kind of numbers these represent. I'm going to say hours. So that the first thing they see in the dropdown is hours. So when they go to select something, they know they are selecting hours. And that would be like, say, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. I'm going to give them all the way up to 12 hours. Okay. Now they have those options. If you go to run it, the only thing that happens is the user can click on that and select a number of hours, but nothing really happens from it because we didn't put any code behind this. I also have to ask the user, I'm still in design mode, reset to interact again with designing it. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. I still have to ask the user for some input that is not numerical, but some sort of string answer. So I have decided I'm going to put a label on the screen. I'm going to call it activity level. I'm taking this idea from the sample at the beginning of the lesson. Activity level label. This is just a label, a prompt, and it's going to say, what level of activity? Keep it simple, okay? This label, they're not going to interact with. They just read it on the screen. But then the answer has to go into some sort of input box. And again, I want to control what the user has to choose from. So I could use drop down. I could use radio buttons. Maybe I'll do drop down again. Why not? Keep it simple. Consistency of input. This is going to be called activity level drop down. That's the name of this object on the screen, activity level dropdown. And the options I'm going to provide them, first I'm going to tell them, I'm just going to put activity level so that they know what this dropdown contains as options. Then I'm going to put light, moderate, or strenuous as the options. Now, given that I've given them 12 hours to choose from, like 12 time frames to choose from, and 3 activity levels, it could be that there could be 12 times 3, 36 different outputs from this program, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it a little simpler. However, I've got the right kinds of input from the user, and now I just need a place on the screen where I will output the answer. So I'm going to use a text area because I'm not going to be fancy and output some sort of image or anything like that. I'm just going to output a suggestion in text. So this is going to be the decision text, decision output area. I'll just call it decision output. And what I'm going to put in there at first is just a prompt to show what's going to show up there. Suggested activity, and I'm just going to put colon, like as if they can expect an activity to get suggested here. Okay. Now I'm done with the design. Even though it's real basic and simple, no frills, I got all the elements that I need. So let me go to the code mode. Code starts by defining your variables. So I'm going to put a comment here. The very first section should always be variable declarations. Then I'm going to leave some space for that, and I'm going to recognize the next thing I would do is create event handlers. And finally, at the bottom of the program, I want to declare and define any functions, so function definitions. Now, variables are just spaces in memory to hold information so that you can use it to make decisions in the program. You declare a variable using the keyword var, var, or if you are in drag and drop mode under variables, you would start with just this very simple declare a variable, var, and you have to give it a name. The first variable I know I'm going to need is someplace to contain the user's decision on how much time they have. And since I'm doing it in hours, I'm going to call it hours. Very descriptive, meaningful variable. The next is going to be the activity level. So I'm going to call that activity level. Really descriptive and meaningful. Says exactly what this variable will contain eventually. Finally, I do need a variable to contain my decision. Whatever it is the program decides for the user is going to go into that variable. For now, you can ignore these warnings because they're just telling me that I defined a variable, but I didn't use it yet. That's to be expected. I will use it in a moment when I define my event handlers and my function definitions. Okay. Now, event handlers come next, and this is one place where I highly recommend, even though you're following me, you're watching me do it in text mode, I still recommend dragging and dropping the on-event block. I'm going to need one for each of my user input elements. So, because I'm asking the user 2 questions, I'm going to need 2 on-event blocks, and they should be dragged and dropped, and they should be separate from each other. There should be space in between. They're not one inside the other, separate. I do drag and drop because it is confusing to keep track of the opening and closing brackets, and what is this extra parentheses, and it's hard to explain to the novice programmer, but just use that and don't change this line and don't change any of the symbols on this line except for the element that you want to respond to an event for, and you want to change this to which event are you responding to. So the first element that I'm going to choose is this one, time dropdown. If the user does something with the time dropdown box, I want to have the program respond to that. Now, did I give it the right name? Time dropdown. Oh, there's a capital D. That would make a difference. Now, do I want to respond just because the user clicked on the time dropdown? No. I want to respond if they changed the time dropdown to something other than hours. So change is the event that I want to handle for this object. Now, what do I want to do when they change the time dropdown? I want to capture whatever the user has entered and store it in a variable. So in this case, for the time dropdown, I'm going to store the results in the hours variable. I'm going to say the hours variable should get the value of, remember, one single equal sign means get the value of, or get assigned to the, get the, whatever's over here gets assigned into hours. What do I want to put there? Whatever comes from the time dropdown box. Now, there is a command in the toolbox where I can get a number from a particular element. And that's what I'm going to use, get number. Now if I try to stick it here, for some reason it's going to move it to the next line. But actually I want to just put it back up there. So I'm going to get a number from the time dropdown and put it into the hours variable so that I can work with it without using this every time. I want to be able to check it against some various things, and I'm just going to use the variable hours because that's a quicker way to refer to it than to keep using this every time. So after I get the input into a variable, then I'm going to need to update the screen. Now, I'm just typing update screen here with the thought in mind that I will be coming down to the bottom of the program and making an update screen function, because that's what we learned in this series of lessons. There's a pattern for when you make an app. Very often, changes by the user means you need to change what's on the screen and update it to reflect the new information. So update screen function is going to be written down here. It'll look like this. Function update screen, empty parentheses for now. I'll explain later why we might not have empty parentheses every time, but for now that's all we're going to have. Then you need an open and closing curly bracket to contain the body of commands that are encapsulated in this function. We'll come back to that later. We're going to have a function called update screen, and I would want to call it every time the user picks a new number of hours. The same thing should happen if they pick a new activity level. So this is called activity level dropdown. I need to handle that event, activity level dropdown, if the user interacts with the activity level dropdown by changing it from something other than what it said before, then I want to get the text from the activity level dropdown and put it into the variable activity level. So this is going to look a lot like the one above, except instead of it being a number, it's a string, so I'm using get text instead of get number. Hours was a numerical input, activity level is a string input, so that's the only difference there. Then, again, I would want to update the screen. So I really hope that the update screen function is going to work when I finally get around to filling out the details of it. But before I do that, I'm just going to convince you that what I've done so far is working by making a watch on my variables, hours and activity level. And I'm going to run the program. Okay, right now, these variables are undefined because the program's not even running. But when I run the program, click on hours. I didn't change anything yet, but as soon as I change it to something else, that number goes into the variable hours. Now the screen does not get updated because I didn't flesh out that function yet, but I could put a little console message here, and I promise you it would print out in the debug console like, yes, we got to this function. There's just nothing happening there yet. Change the activity level to moderate, and that's what you see in activity level now. We can keep on changing it as much as we like. It will keep registering into the variables. So I'm confident that my event handlers are working properly, and I'm ready to move on to the function update screen. Now, what is this function going to do? I'm supposed to put a comment according to the rubric that describes the purpose and function of this update screen. So the purpose is to make a decision based on user input and reflect a decision on the screen as output. Okay, there's two parts to that. First, make the decision, then put that on the screen as output. So how will I make a decision based on these values that are in the variables? I have to use conditionals, if else statements. Okay, if you're looking for them in the toolbox, they're here under if and else And I'm going to start with just an if statement, okay? First of all, if the user has chosen a small number of hours, like, for instance, less than 2 hours, I'm going to consider that not very much time. And I'm actually not going to give 36 different outputs based on the number of hours available given by the user. I'm going to just categorize it in two ways, a little bit of time or a lot of time. In my mind, as the programmer, this is how I would make up my flowchart for this. If hours is less than 2, then I have to handle the different levels of activity. Okay? So if they have chosen less than 2 hours and the activity level is equal to light, this is one combination of possibilities. In that case, I'm going to set my decision to contain some kind of short-term light activity level, like go for a walk. You could make your own decision what your activity would be if this was your programming, but I'm just, whatever comes off the top of my head, I'm throwing it in there. That's one possible case of combinations of input. However, let me say we have to handle all the possibilities, right? So there might be another case. Else, if that was not true, that they chose both an hours less than 2 and an activity level of light, maybe if they chose hours less than 2, I'm going to stick with a small number of hours for now. Maybe I'll make it 3 so that, okay. If they have less than 3 hours and the activity level is equal to moderate, I might make a different decision for them. I might recommend go for a jog. Okay. However, if they don't have much time, still hours is less than 3, but they do want something strenuous, I might recommend that they what can you do outside that's strenuous? Play a pickup game of basketball, because you could just play for however long you have and it's strenuous, but you don't have to commit all day to this thing. Okay? So this covers like basically my one category in my mind of having not very much time, but I've got all the different activity levels dealt with, and I've got the combinations of those input choices. Okay. Notice when you do an if statement, you have to have an open and closing parentheses around your condition. The rubric calls for at least one of these compound conditionals. Your logic for your program may not require you to have as many as I am of these compound conditionals, but this is the way I'm thinking of it, is just to cover every possible combination of hours and activity level, breaking hours into, yes, I collected it as a number, but it's really basically, in my mind, any number less than 3 is a little bit of time, and any number greater than 3 is going to be a lot of time. And I'm just going to make 6 different decisions based on that. Okay, with combined with activity level. So the other 3, else if, would be in the case where hours is greater than or equal to 3, and basically all these different activity levels. The first one, activity level is equal to light. If you have a lot of time but you want light activity level, maybe your decision should be ride on a rails to trails bike trail, because that's a flat gravelly road. It's not real strenuous. You have light activity. You got a lot of time. You could drive there and do it. Okay. else if the hours, oops, I just noticed a typo here, hours. If the hours is greater than or equal to 3 again, in other words, you have a lot of time and your activity level should be moderate, and it's a beautiful day. That's assumed according to what my question was. Your decision might be to hike. Go for a hike in the mountains. Maybe some people would call that strenuous, but it depends on, the trail. Anyway, if, and this is really my last combination, if the hours is greater than or equal to 3 and your activity level that you want is strenuous, and I think I did all lowercase, so I got to stick with that, strenuous. Make sure you spell everything right. The decision that I'm going to set in my variable is going to be, let's see, long amount of time, strenuous activity. I'm going to say try mountain biking. Okay. You may disagree with my decisions. That's not the point. I've got everything covered. But just in case I haven't covered everything, I am going to provide one last case because the compiler will check each of these cases, and if one of them is true, it will go with that and it will skip the rest. And it will keep checking each one in turn, and if it does not find that any of these compound conditionals was true, it will go to this last else where I have no condition on it. So this would be like the default condition. My decision is going to be you can never go wrong with playing catch at the park. All right, that's my default on a beautiful day. So now that I have the logical structure to fill in what the decision is going to be internally in that variable, watch what happens. If I run the program, okay, and I choose a number of hours, say I choose 3 hours, but I did not yet choose an activity level, okay, it says activity level undefined. Then I choose an activity level moderate. Oh, they're filled in. What if I put a watch on the decision variable? What does the decision variable say? Oh, for 3 hours, moderate, go for a hike in the mountains. That's here. 3 hours, moderate level, go for a hike in the mountains. If I change this to 1 hour, it says go for a jog. If I change it to light, go for a walk. If I change it to strenuous, now for some reason it says you can never go wrong with, so 1 hour strenuous seems to not have been working. Oh, that's because strenuous was misspelled somewhere. I see. Strenuous was misspelled in the drop-down. That's going to be a problem because I spelled it correctly in here. Let me go back to design mode and just make sure I spelled my user input things. Strenuous. There we go. Now rerun. Check it again. Hours is, where's my run? I got to be in code mode. There we go. Hours, 2 hours, light, strenuous level, go for a walk. Change it to 3 hours, rails to trails, bike ride. Okay. 1 hour, go for a walk. 5 hours, okay, let me change this to moderate. Go for a hike, strenuous. Try mountain biking, okay? It's working, but nothing's showing up on the screen yet because all I have is the internal variable decision filled up. I did not yet output that to the screen. There's one line of code left in this program. I need to set the text of this output box to have decision as its contents. So notice that the name of this is decision output. So I have to set the text of decision output here. And what do I want going on the screen? The contents of my decision variable. So now when I run it, If I select 2 hours, oh, decision output, I spelled it wrong. Reset, run, 2 hours. Hey, without even an activity level selected, it tells me I could go play catch in the park. Moderate, go for a jog. Strenuous, play game of basketball. Light, go for a walk. It's working. I could change the number of hours, get a different result. Change the type of activity. There we go. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope that you don't just copy this exactly, but you do your own decision and you use this as a template or a inspiration for how to organize the process. Good luck.